Hey, I don't even know why I'm recording this. I wasn't planning to. I will probably just save it and maybe edit it onto a longer video about ancestor work later on. But I just wanted to say something really quickly because this is really strange. I came to the graveyard. This is the day before Samhain, before Halloween, to visit my great grandfather, who I never met in real life, or living, I should say. I never met him living. And this is the cemetery he's supposed to be buried at. And I've done the research, and I cannot find him. And I have a picture of what it's supposed to look like, and it's from 2011. It's not that long ago. But this is one of the hard things about ancestor work is sometimes the internet has incorrect information, or I really hope people aren't removing headstones. But I have so many offerings. I have apples, I have wine, I've got lavender and mugwort. I was going to stop and get flowers today, but I literally left my wallet at home. My whole purse. All I brought was my spirit work kit. So I guess there was a reason for that. And I asked the spirits here for entry before I came in. And I've been to cemeteries before, but this one feels so different. It's really strange. It's odd, and maybe it's just because the graves are so old, but some of them are off kilter and the headstones are just all random and pointed different ways. And if I don't end up finding my grandfather, I'm going to leave my offerings at the oldest grave here. But it is the weirdest feeling, and I really wish I could describe it. It's not fear. I'm not terrified. It's just there's a very, very much a sense of otherness. Like I know I'm in the presence of something otherworldly. Birds are flying. I'm just gonna save this for now. I do want to make a longer video about ancestor work later on, and it's something I'm just now starting to do seriously, because up until lately I just addressed my pagan dead, is what I said. So I'm just going to say goodbye. I'm gonna edit this later. Literally all I did was give offerings to him and talk to him like he was a person. I mean, I didn't do anything weird, but, well, weird. But that's personal. That's between me and him. He must have really loved his wife. His wife died 20 years before he did. The first thing I felt was offense that I didn't bring anything for his wife. And so I'm like, okay, fine. I had an apple and a pear as well as the flowers. And so I put a pear on his wife's grave. And it wasn't until then that he felt placated. Like he was more concerned about her being respected than himself. That's kind of beautiful. But other than that, I'm not really going to share what happened, because I feel like that was really personal. And in normal ancestor work, a lot of people would share their names. But with my personal history, most of my living family is pretty toxic, and I even almost didn't make a YouTube channel because I was kind of worried about them finding me. Other than my brother, I don't talk to any of my family because my living family is pretty abusive. But I'm not going to live in fear of them, and I don't care anymore. And that's another reason why I'm doing ancestor work, to go back before our weird got twisted, before our karma got twisted and darkened, and cleanse our ancestral house, basically. That was really intense. I almost cried, but I didn't have tears. I don't know if anyone has ever had that experience of the emotion welling up where it feels like you're gonna cry, but you don't have any tears. It's really hard to explain. Really hard. There's a Methodist church attached to the cemetery, So I ended up needing to leave. A gentleman came over to ask if I was doing all right. He was a nice guy. We talked a little bit about genealogy. I assume he was the guy who kept the church next there. I have a pin on my jacket that says "Witchy Weirdo," and he was wearing a giant copper cross. So I didn't scream, "I'm doing ancestor work." But, I told him I was there to visit my great-grandfather's grave and that I had been getting into genealogy. And I said I was really cold because I had been wandering around trying to find it because it was my first time there, which is literally what happened, and that I had to sit down in the middle of the cemetery and pray before I could find it. Didn't tell him I prayed to Odin. But we had a nice short little conversation, but after that I decided it was time to go. I will edit all these little bits and pieces together later because I did figure out that I can use InShot to at least edit things together. I don't know how to do much more than that right now, but we will see how things go. So I gotta go because I'm getting into town now instead of the country. Bye. Hi, this is Amanda Artemisa Forrester, Rune Reader Diviner, Polytheist Mystic, and you just saw the few clips from my first Ancestor Work experience, which I did a few weeks ago. Yeah, so I've had some time to process it since then, and as you can probably saw in the recording, I was a little out of it. Spirit work is pretty draining. And if the second clip seemed a little weird and like I was in the middle of a sentence, I thought I was already recording, and I was not. But that's something that sometimes happens when you're in a little bit of a state of altered consciousness, where it's kind of difficult to just walk into another world and then immediately start doing the practical things needed in this one. It's not really quite possible to immediately come right back down to Earth. So sorry that you missed part of the conversation, but I guess you saw enough. I guess you saw what you were supposed to see. So this is going to be the video about ancestor work, which I have been promising for a while because I have been wanting to make a video about ancestor veneration. I talked a little bit about ancestral debt in my video about weird fate and divination. So this is going to be jumping off from that directly into ancestor veneration and ancestor worship and ancestor work. All of which, boy, this is a complicated subject. Lessons from the experience I had: bring extra offerings. Always bring extra offerings. There's always more ancestors than you think. Like, I don't know anything about my great-grandmother at all, other than her name. But luckily I had enough. And he was definitely offended at first that I did not... Like, I saw him in my mind, like my mind's eye, like standing like this with his hands crossed. And he had this very, "you impress me now" attitude. But once I started talking and basically just conversed with him like a person, which again, I'm not going to tell you everything I talked with him about, because that's my life. My family matters. But yeah, he calmed down once I put the pear on his wife's grave. So yeah, always have extra offerings apparently. All right, so who are your ancestors? Obviously, they're the people that came before you, your mother's mothers and your father's fathers. But it's a little bit more complicated than that, because they don't have to be your blood ancestors. If you were adopted, you actually have 4 lines of ancestors to call on. You have your adopted mother line and your adopted father line, as well as your biological parents. So you actually have more people in your ancestral house than you realize. And I realize that for people who are adopted, you may feel like you don't know your family, and I'm sure you love your adopted family, but I'm sure there's also a lot of mixed feelings there too. Like people who are mixed race probably have mixed feelings, and there's a lot of issues to work through there, and ancestor work too. But you actually have an extremely you actually have extra if you're adopted, so that's actually pretty cool. Step parents, if you're close with, I mean, marriage isn't just coming together in love, it's combining ancestral houses. So if you think so, then if you're close with your step parents, that would be ancestors as well. But more than that, ancestors of the lineage of work or knowledge, which think about if you're in a profession, like I'm going to use doctor as an example, but it doesn't have to be something as highfalutin as doctor. But I'm using doctor as an example because not only do you have to study for so long and you become sort of initiated into a culture, the culture of medicine, even nurse, anyone in the medical field, but you could honor Hippocrates, the Greek father of medicine, as an ancestor. He literally would be your ancestor, your professional patron. Because, I mean, today doctors still take the Hippocratic Oath almost word for word. I'm saying almost because the original Hippocratic Oath swore by Apollo and Asclepius and Hygiena. Yeah, and Hippocrates was pagan, so of course the Hippocratic Oath swore to pagan gods. It's too bad we still do that. But, you know. Anyway, that would be cool. Anyway, so that any kind of specialized knowledge that you're initiated into are religious traditions, especially like British witchcraft, where it's definitely a secretive type of knowledge where other people aren't allowed in. But really, I'm using a professional one here. If you're in a trade, if you're a welder, let's say the person who takes you under their wing not only trains you in the knowledge that you need, but tells you stories about the person that trains them. And let's say the person that trained them is deceased. You're not just absorbing the knowledge that this person, who you never met, taught this other person. You're absorbing the stories of their life. That's ancestral knowledge. So, I mean, it really makes sense. This is going to sound like I'm watering down what ancestor work is to some people, but this is what it is. And we're really not taught to honor our ancestors in monotheist culture. But this is integral to polytheism. This is very, very important to polytheism. And honoring ancestors is almost triggering to people who come from less than ideal families, let's say. And I am counting myself in this. My family is not a good family very much. There are some people who are good. I have a cousin that I get along with, like one. And my brother's awesome. But other than that, yeah, most of my family does a lot of stuff in there that's pretty twisted. But that doesn't change the fact that honoring our ancestors is actually vital to polytheism. And maybe things started to get twisted when we started getting ripped away from our traditions. And the other people that you can honor are I honor all the shamans and spirit workers that went before me. You know, I just say something like that. And great heroes like Hypatia of Alexandria is a big one for me. You know, any hero of yours is not necessarily an ancestor, really, but you can honor them as one, if that makes sense. But if it's someone, like if you're an astrophysicist, Isaac Newton would conceivably be considered a ancestral patron. So stuff like that. But some people work with specific groups of dead. Like, I know people that are called to work with the military dead or the transgender dead. And there's also people who died as children. People work with specific groups. You don't need to go looking for that. If you are called to work with a specific group, they'll come to you. You'll know. If you've always had this great pull to a certain group, you'll know. That's just something that it's you don't need to have a special thing that's your thing. It's okay if you do, but I mean, this is already important enough work as it is. There's actually several books about this. You can get them on Amazon. You can get them from Asphodel Press. From, I think there's some on Lulu. I'm not sure about that, but the one that I have been reading the most right now that has been helping me is Honoring the Ancestors: A Basic Guide by Galina Krasitova. So this has been guiding me through a lot of the basic steps, and I've been actually researching a particular great grandfather and his father who did come over from Germany in the 1880s. And that's who I went to go visit. My great grandfather in the who is in the area. His father's buried in Wisconsin, so it would probably be a while before I could go see him. But there's there's a lot of stuff in here that would be really helpful as if you are looking to get started in ancestor work. It's, I don't know how to describe how it made me feel, honestly. It's really hard to describe spiritual experiences to somebody who's never had them, honestly. Boy, I learned that in my last relationship. And even the people who have had spiritual experiences, it can be hard to describe them to. But when you know that you have these people, these allies that are a part of your life still after they've passed on, when you've actually been able to talk to one, to sense their presence, it really changes how you live your life. It really does. Because it really makes you think about how your actions impact people, everyone. It's pretty incredible. I don't know what else to say. So, I guess I'll sign off. Thank you. Keep seeking. I hope this was helpful. Didn't talk too much about it, but maybe it was helpful. Have a good night.